It's Edward Turney, right?
Edwin.
Edwin. So good thing we had that conversation then.
Yes.
So this is Georgina Speaks, and we're here to interview Edwin Turney. And the reason I'm interviewing is because he's a black man or a man of color, or I don't even know what the right thing is to say. And we can have that conversation too, eh? But I honestly don't know. So I'm trying not to be a smartass, but sometimes it's inherent. Eh? So anyway, as a result of a lot of the upheaval lately, we've had a number of conversations come up in our meetings and stuff about Black Lives Matters, about white privilege is another thing that has come up. And I can only speak to white privilege from the basis of being a white man who grew up in Canada. And I was aware of it, but I was only ever aware of it from my end of it. And I realized that it was there, but I thought, well, what's the big deal? I'm a hometown boy. I should be, whatever. And it never, until recent years, I never went to the other end of it. Mm. And so that will be part of the dialogue that we would have. So you were born in Toronto, I understand?
Correct.
And you moved to Georgina about 22 years ago, more or less, 88?
88, yeah.
Okay, so I think the floor is yours. You live in Georgina? Knock yourself out.
What do you want me to tell you about Georgina? Georgina's been a fantastic place. Had good friends up here even before I moved up here. And on top of everything, I see that little has changed in the sense since I've been coming up here when it comes to racial people up inside here. I mean, we all have it. We all have it in us. Even the black people have it.
Yeah.
But everything's been just great when it comes down to being up here.
So you haven't come across a lot of blatant racial... Well, everybody I speak to of a minority, I don't even know if minority is a term. Of color, or like other ethnic groups as well, like as far as people being prejudiced. But color has a specific connotation. When I grew up in Aurora, so they were over there and we were here, so all the guys with their jokes and their carrying on however they did, it was like no harm was being done. You didn't see the harm in it. Okay. So
So in other words, you're saying if somebody in your surrounding did a black joke, it was no big deal.
Well, I can tell you honestly, and no bullshit, for myself, because I had personal issues of my own. Anything that I perceived that would hurt somebody, that seemed like bad, I never had a good feeling about it. But the extension of that is that, when I grew up, if you stuck up to somebody who was prejudiced, like if you said, hey, that's not right, you got the wrath of everybody. Like, it's just the way it was. And it had an us and them mentality. And not even a severely negative thing. It was like the us and them is like they're not as good as us, or that was always the... and I don't even know if anybody actually thought that, but it was the predominant dialogue, and I couldn't even tell you, even now looking back, what people were thinking at the time when that stuff was going on. I remember the day Martin Luther King got shot. I was standing I was 10 years old, and I had no idea what was going on or what it was all about, but I just remember the older kids, and this is where I think a lot of it comes from. The older kids talking about the white people having to hide in the sewers down there. We were in Canada talking about in the States, right? That's okay. But these are guys that I was 10, so they would have been like 13, my older brother's friends. And so when you hear that stuff from a 13-year-old, what you're actually hearing is his father. Okay. That's what he's hearing at home. That's right. And then he's going out there trying to spew and be a man. That's right. Like that kind of stuff. So I don't know how that reflects what a difference it makes or not, but I know. So I'm going to let you speak on this issue because I'm not qualified, to be honest with you.
Well, ask your question, man.
Huh?
Ask your question.
What was it like to be black growing up in Toronto?
Black being in Toronto. It was basically where I grew up, because I grew up with the Jewish area. Right. Which basically they were persecuted as much as we were. Sure. And they treated me as what they would treat themselves. And I enjoyed the camaraderie with them, learning from them, being who I am. And didn't put me down and I didn't put them down. So
Right.
this was a good thing in my case. And my father and my mother always taught us one thing: we all bleed the same way.
Yeah, I was wondering, I was going to ask you, what was your mother and father's take on,
They were very liberal.
right?
I think I'm about, the third generation liberal. And when it came down to them in general, they were fantastic people. They knew the balance when it came to different individuals. And
Yeah.
they always taught us one thing: if he slaps you, don't be afraid to slap back. And that's the way we grew up.
They taught you you're equal.
Totally equal, yes.
They taught you not to discriminate, actually.
Correct.
Yeah, that's a pretty interesting perspective from the other end.
Yes.
Yeah.
We were not brought to the table talking about a certain different race and hating that race at the same time. My father and my mother did not put up with that.
Yeah, it was a different kind of racism, or different. It wasn't a prejudice thing. Like my father, he talked about black people like they were something different.
Okay.
Respectful of them, but he talked about how good they could dance and what great athletes they were. Eh?
Okay.
Never spoke a lot about the scientists that were involved. Like that was his take on it. And he, as far as he was concerned, he was being like I know my father would never hurt anybody. Like he would never say something that. He was whatever he would say, he would think he was, complimenting or praising. So I don't know how you compensate for that, or I don't know if that's a bad thing, or he's a bad person because of that. Like I don't look at it.
Well, I've always been told that you're not born being prejudiced; you are taught being prejudiced.
Yeah, of course.
Right.
Yeah.
So when it came to, like I'm saying, judging people, all right, I didn't look at where they got it from. It was how they got it.
Yeah.
And it seemed to balance itself out to say, okay, well, you know what? If I wanted to be like them, I would go along with that. But I always had my own path to lead.
Yeah, me too.
Right?
Me too. I mean, it was around, but I was never. Till I got older. I'd say from when I was about 16 on or 17 on, I wouldn't put up with it. I wouldn't be around people that would be like that. I would tell them, you're crazy. When I knew someone, rednecks, Canadian, we call them Lugans.
Yeah.
The States, they're rednecks. I talked to my buddy Alan Swan, I think he's from Lebanon.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I said, what's a redneck in Lebanon? And he said, what do you mean? I said, no, you got rednecks. I know you do, because you got bigoted people about other races. So, I mean, it's no different in Canada and no different in the States. He said, yeah, okay, we got those. And he told me what the name was. So I prefer to look at it like a condition that I want to believe people are inherently good. That's what I want to believe, and that's what I cling to, And then I had an interesting conversation yesterday with a young man from Keswick. He's a political science major, and he's in Ottawa right now in university. So we were talking, and he's heavily into the protests in Ottawa and that, and Black Lives Matters and all, because he's a student. He's a young guy, 20 years old, good guy. But we want to say that, well, we're not as bad as the States. So we always use that as
an example
to say that, we're okay because we're not like that.
Correct.
But it's it's a red herring, because it's got nothing to do with that. It's got to do with what are our responsibilities, and we have our history with prejudices, but because we didn't have the whole slavery issue, wasn't as predominant here. We had isolated cases of it in the past, decades in the past or centuries past, but we never had an entire minority of population of it. So, but we have our history with the natives.
Yes.
Twice as abominable, just as abominable or worse.
It probably was, growing up, it was probably worse for the natives than it was for the blacks at the time. But like I said, in my area where I grew up, it was between, after the Jewish people left, then the Italians came in.
Yeah.
And those people were basically from the Second World War.
Yeah.
And they only wanted a place to live, get an education for their children, and make better lives for their children.
Sure.
So in that same process, we were going through the same thing. Because my father, he's from the West Indies. And
right.
My mom, she's from St. John, New Brunswick. I always call it East meeting West.
Yeah.
And I'm the North.
Sure.
And that made a lot of sense to me to know that, you know what, the area I grew up with, it's like I said, you do what you possibly can do when it comes down to yourself and showing your children's children
Right.
how to not be prejudiced to get ahead. It's doing it on your own honor.
Sure, that makes total sense. But you know what? I can just already tell that you had decent, caring parents,
Very
intelligent parents.
Yes.
So it was. They wouldn't say that son of a bitch. They would say pray for him.
That's about it. Yeah. Well,
there's a difference right there. And
see, the thing with us, we were big in the church.
oh, nice.
Oh yes.
Yeah.
I got to the point from being in the choir to serving the church and the whole 9 yards. So
Nice. Well, yeah, you know, it's funny because, like, all the hullabaloo, I got heavily into the Native issue because of the atrocities that happened at the orphanages at the hands of the Catholic Church.
Correct.
So that was my mother's Catholic Church. So I had to, I really went through a 6-month, I was at it for 6 months in my head and researching and so on, trying to reconcile. And where I came to on it was that evil people will gravitate towards positions of authority over their victims.
Correct.
And so, as in that respect, the Catholic Church is almost as much of a victim of those people as was. I mean, now beyond that, they did horrendous things to try to cover it up, to allow it to still exist, and for that they should be held accountable. And so I agree with that. But in the end, my mother and her whole family, they were Catholic, Irish Catholic, from out Coburg way. And I watched her whole family for my whole life derive their strength from their faith.
That's right.
And go to church every Sunday. And I watched my mother go toe-to-toe with a priest who got a little too big for his britches.
Well, they're only human.
Yeah, well, you know what? And she took him to task. So when I seen my mother do that, then I knew, okay, you know, this is about spirituality. It's not about religiosity or organization. Yeah, so that was kind of neat. So let's talk a little bit about in your teenage years in Toronto, yeah? Mm-hmm. So you nightclubbed and that kind of stuff when you were a young musician?
Oh, yes. Oh,
okay.
Yeah. That was quite the time back then.
What about white and black? Because white and black musicians are, my experience has been usually they're pretty tight.
With musicians, oh God.
Musicians, yeah. No, musicians. Let's be specific.
We are a breed of our own because, I mean, we all had the ear.
Yeah.
Instead of looking at the color, they had the ear.
Yeah.
If you could play, and you're attempting to try to play, we will give you the push to say, okay, instead of doing this, do this.
Yeah, you're in.
And that's the way we grew up. Is like, okay, there was guys that I knew that went into big band.
Yeah.
And there's other guys that just basically played it, like being in a school and I'm in the marching band and the whole 9 yards.
Yeah.
A lot of them, like I'm saying, were such characters in their own rights that when it came down to it, we all had a great time, and we didn't look at the color. It was just what you could do, your ability to play.
Right.
And that's basically what we were all about. And after the gig, it was party time. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So none of it was colorblind.
Well, it was basically, yeah.
Yeah, that gang was colorblind.
Well, my father used to say, you don't have to be like a horse and wear blinders. We don't see horses anymore wearing blinders. But it only meant one thing to me. You know, we have a way of looking at ourselves openly instead of just looking down that narrow path.
Right.
So that's the way I basically grew up in my teens. And like I said, with the black and white issue, we basically had our black and white issues. I mean, Don't get me wrong. I had it out with the best of them, right?
And of course.
God got what I deserved and gave what I deserved.
So you had some squabbles over that?
Well, yeah, but it was
defending yourself, or
it wasn't the point of, how you'd say, holding on to a grudge because of his color.
Right.
All right. It happened. It was over. Shook hands and went about our way.
Oh, nice. That's yeah. So then it wasn't about that. I mean,
no.
You know, it's funny. I posted Tim's redneck moments. I just there's unconscious bias that's in there, and so when you find yourself in a situation where there's an ethnic group on the other side and it's not going your way, the little redneck wants to jump up and make it all about that, right?
Correct.
So then you have to tell them, you know, pipe down a little, buddy, I got this, you know, and that's how I view it. It's kind of a humorous way to view it, but it's true. When it does rear its ugly head, and you go, nah, and you just don't give into it. And but to say, you know, it's not there, I think it's a mistake. I think it's more important to acknowledge acknowledge that it's there and be aware of it and never give in to it, you know?
Well, it's like my dad also says, if you lay down with dogs with fleas, you're going to wake up with fleas.
Yeah, 100%.
Right?
Yeah, 100%.
So you try to stay away from that type of atmosphere or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
And know to yourself that you're a better person. And I knew right off the bat when it came to my parents, I was a better person.
Well, your parents instilled that in you.
Right, and I didn't judge anybody on just the looks.
Yeah.
I judged them on their abilities and basically on their education.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, you know, you go to other countries, we don't have what they, or we have what they don't have.
Right.
And, I mean, once they get to grade 6, that's basically it, unless their parents have got money.
Yeah.
Right, and that's the only way they put them through school. We're very lucky in this country that we have the governments here that put in place. We go to school, we can learn, and it's for free.
Yeah.
All right.
100%.
Right. So basically, like I said, in my case, I never had to look back on what I had done. I'm very proud of what I had done, and being a great grandfather now.
Right on.
And seeing how they did and was there for that for them.
Sure.
I'm very good at that. I'm very good.
Yeah, nice. I talked to I was talking to this young guy, and he wants to protest and they want to do that stuff, and I support them 100%. Anything that they feel like they need to do. There's still so I want to say Canada's different than the States, but it's irrelevant, and it's like we're not as bad as them. Or he gave me an analogy when they say Black Lives Matter, and then people say, well, all lives matter. It's irrelevant. That's a different subject. We're talking about Black Lives Matter. And the analogy he gave me was, for example, when they say save the turtles, they're not saying all other animals don't matter, but we need to do this right now. And so they want to look at that issue, so how much of it actually exists. And there's pockets of ethnicity in different areas that have some prejudice against them. I know I have friends, people I've known in the course of my life that were prejudiced. I have people right now that use the N-word. I guess I hate saying the N-word because I look like a CNN reporter trying to get away with it. So, trying to get away with that. But so I used to think the N-word was the people from Newfoundland, but I guess it's... I don't
they
use
always get a bad rap, don't they?
I don't use that one anymore either.
No.
But that I had lots of friends that would tell, ethnicity Newfie jokes from the Polish people, whatever, like those jokes. They all went on, and they were prevalent in my whole upbringing when we were kids, like friends and family. My father and his friend, like it was prevalent, but it was they seen it as harmless humor. I honestly don't believe that they were prejudiced. They just didn't know any better. I would say that would be, but it's time to know better, I guess.
Well, it's time to grow up. Instead of taking 2 steps forward and continue, we're taking 2 steps forward and 1 step back.
Right.
And that's kind of hard to grasp, especially being at this age now, to see this. We should have been so well...
Yeah, it should have been done by now.
Done by now, yes.
As a race, we should have been, as a human race, should have been on top of it. Like, just everybody's getting fed, everybody's getting an education, like, easily. Easily. But the evil people in the world...
Well, I don't classify it as much as evil as greedy.
Greedy, yeah, well, that would be my definition of an evil person. Greed is one of the
worst things my father had told me. If a person has $1, you have $1, I have $1. We're all good. But that next person, that third person, would want $1.50. Why? Because it comes up with greed. Yeah. Even though we're all doing the same, we're all on the same level. Yeah. That one person, out of the rest of us, wants to do or take more than what it's supposed to be. Yeah,
you know what? That's I help Cubans a lot. I go to Cuba a lot, so I help Cubans a lot. If I make $5,000, I'll set $500 aside. If I go to Cuba, I go a couple. I used to go every couple of months, but I haven't been able to during the pandemic. But if I'm spending $3,000 on a vacation, if I can't spend $300 to buy some Cuban a fridge that needs it, what good am I? That's how I look at it. Number one, and number two, in the vein of what you were just saying, each guy has $1. Why is it that because God gives some people more gifts than others? Intelligence, drive, ability, whatever it is, and it doesn't matter what it is. Where is it written that just because they have those abilities that they should have a better lot in life than someone who's a simpler person and just willing to work, but not could be a supervisor. Why is it that a supervisor should have? And it's all based on commerce. Well, that person's activity is generating more money, so then they should get more money. Why? They're doing the same 8 hours work.
Well, that's true. Absolutely.
Guy's going there for 8 hours, sitting at a desk. This guy's going there for 8 hours, running the machine. Why is he?
Don't make sense, does it?
I'm waiting for you to tell me the answer there.
It doesn't make sense. I mean, some answers you really can't answer.
Yeah, no, I know.
Some questions you just can't answer because the simple reason of it is that's the way
that's our system.
That's our system.
Yeah, it's the capitalist system.
Right, exactly.
And I think, what's his name? Who's the Chinese guy that, Suzuki or?
Oh, Dave Suzuki.
Yeah, I like the guy.
He is very intelligent, he's a very smart man. And he came to when his parents came here, they didn't have anything either.
No.
And it wasn't the point that he flaunted anything. He picked up his education.
Yeah.
And now he spreads the word. And I
he
can
did
sit
a whole
down.
documentary on capitalism.
Right, exactly.
And commercial farming, for example. And what commercial farming eliminates in all the villages where they do it.
Well,
and it doesn't satisfy the need.
If more people had done what he has done, this country would be so well.
Yeah, 100%.
You know, so well taken care of. And per square mile or whatever, we haven't got enough people in this country
to eat the food that we could grow.
Correct.
Yeah, no, globally it's like that, I believe. But it's the commercial aspect of it or the capitalist aspect of it.
And that's where we go back to greed again.
Yeah, 100%. No, I agree 100%. I don't know what the answers are, but I just know that I did a song one time called Hungry Children. Because one child anywhere in the world going to bed hungry boggles my mind.
It is. I agree.
Do you know what I mean? Like, just feed them. They should have, you know what? The military should only have one function. They should show up at any border. They should have a world military, and they show up at any border, and their only function is to provide proof that the children are getting fed. Okay, you're good. We're off the hook. We're out of here then. All the kids getting fed. Let the adults do whatever the hell they want, but make sure all the kids get fed.
I agree.
Yeah, and then say that's their function as a military, to go make sure all the children in the world are fed, you know?
Well, see, those are the innocent ones, the children. And like I said, you cannot preach. To me, you cannot preach enough to tell me that, you know what, a child should go hungry.
No, ever. Yeah, it's crazy.
I will not accept that by no means. No child in this world
should ever go,
even though we're in Canada, no child in the world should ever go
to
the bed hungry.
I agree 100%. And
yes.
I don't know, it's such an imbalance all over the world. And the imbalances are becoming more present, more visible because of the global economy now. And there was some Nobel Prize winning scientists that we're talking about carbon tax. And it's funny because I look at carbon taxes, the government's going to rip me off with some more money or whatever. I'm like everybody else, you just bitch about my taxes. You know, that's not a new concept.
Well, that's all, we all do the same. We all complain about our taxes.
Death and taxes. There's a standing joke about it. So
correct.
But I was looking into carbon tax, and there was they were looking at, and it intrigued me because they're looking at a world global carbon tax for more emissions. They looked at it as the possible way to not only address global warming, but adjust economies where unfair economies exist, and more so the money that they would invest to get communities in Africa and in different colonies around the world where they're poor, make adjustments in that regard. Now, there's something globally that's got to happen. I think this pandemic has been great for everybody's peace of mind. I can tell you that.
It's never going to go back to where it was since we've had this. I can tell you it straight up. There are going to be people that are going to be hurting, and they're going to be hurting bad. I don't want to see anybody going towards crime, but it seems like back in the 40s and Roaring 20s, how you had your Al Capone, you had all these other guys.
100%.
And the people back then, they were starving, you know. They couldn't get what there was. Depression was a big thing.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I hope we don't have to go back to that again, but it will never be the same as what it was.
No.
Okay? I can tell you that straight up. I'm so glad that I didn't have to go through this in the sense of what my children are going through and their children are going through
and what
right
they're
now.
going to go through.
And what they're going to go through because it's going to be a lot harder for them.
Yeah, I don't know. I have no idea. I got lucky. I had a couple of permits, ready when the shit hit the fan.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just been building I've been just doing what I would normally do. I can't hug my grandkids.
Right.
Haven't been able to since March, and that I go there to the house every day, and I.
Well, you see, I miss my first year of my great granddaughter.
Oh yeah.
Right. I would have loved to hug her and
Brutal,
just.
eh?
Oh well, like I said, it's a new world.
Well, I was actually living at my son's house because I have a summer place I stay,
Mm-hmm.
and it ends in October and it starts in April. So during the downtime, usually I'm in Cuba for months. So if there's a couple weeks here and there where I'm in Canada, I stay at my son's house. And they were around me all the time. I was playing with them, rolling around on the ground with them and having a laugh.
Mm-hmm.
And then the COVID happened, and they said, oh, just stay here during the whole... But I was afraid because I was out on job sites and everything all the time.
Mm-hmm.
I could never live with myself if I brought that home to those guys,
No.
So,
that's something like I said, we're a people, especially as Canadians, we're a people of hugging, being close.
Right.
And this has just turned us like a 90-degree turn when it came down to having our families around us. The government I agree with the government. We should stay our distance. Because, I would hate to see
100%.
myself give it to my grandchildren or my great-grandchildren. Right? And I never get over that. I go to my death or my
anything but,
death
yeah.
to say, okay, fine,
100%.
I'm never going to anything but that.
So you were a musician.